evening, cult members, and welcome to Pop Culture Cult. I'm Sean.
I'm Janice.
And welcome to our reaction, discussion, review, sobbing of The Last of Us episode 7. Episode 7. This one's called Kin. 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 7. I'm trying to do math in my head. I was told there's no math. If you've not been around here, we just watched the episode. We're instantly reacting and discussing it. I have played the game a couple different times, been through the walkthrough a couple different times. She is coming to it blind from HBO. Now you're caught up. I have thoughts. Many of them was me putting the blanket over my mouth going, that was from the game. That's the exact line from the game. But this is the episode we got to the argument between Ellie and Joel, which is one of the most famous things in all of gaming. Is Ellie telling Joel that I am, everyone around me has died, everyone around me has left me. I only feel safe with you, and you're kicking me to the curb to Tommy. That's this episode. From my point of view, I have thoughts.
Okay.
From your point of view, how do you feel?
It's weird. So I feel a little. I don't know if anticlimactic is the right word, but like for Joel, his whole purpose.
You ever watched a movie and thought, like, this is just visually amazing, and I just love the way it looks, and the colors are amazing? Well, our friends over at Movie Palette have come up with these great pieces of art that you could put up on your wall to show your love of movies without really necessarily being overly dramatic about it. Think of a movie barcode kind of thing, where you can look at the colors and know what the movie is, but it's very, very subtle. If you know us, we are into Tron Legacy. The music and the lights and the color itself is just amazing. Just to give you an idea of what they have, go to moviepalette.com, find your own personal favorite movie, your movie color palette, and have it hang on your wall. At checkout, put in Pop Culture 15 to get 15% off. Thank you, Movie Palette, for sponsoring this video. Link is in the description down below. And don't forget, use Pop Culture 15 at checkout to get 15% off your order.
Was to get to Tommy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Ellie is the package, right? She's the thing that he needs to get to the Fireflies. But for him, his whole thing was to get to Tommy, and he got there, and Tommy's like, yeah, here's my woman, we're having a baby. And Joel's like, cool, see ya. Like, what? And he was just gonna leave, like, leave the whole situation, leave Ellie with Tommy, leave Tommy with whatever, and do what? Go home?
Right.
Like,
right.
I was very confused.
Yes, you are correct.
Okay.
That aspect of the game is very interesting because the whole game has been to this point of trying to get to the Fireflies and getting to Wyoming and get to Tommy. And I'm glad that they showed the hydroelectric dam, because that's where they first come across Tommy, and it's them still trying to figure out how to get the dam to work. Is where they are in the game. But here they said 3 months, I think, whatever.
Yeah.
But the story at that point kind of also feels like a little of why is Joel making the decision to leave right then? And it's I think really well portrayed that he's having panic attacks with the idea of keeping Ellie safe, and that the thought of him losing another child like he lost Sarah is the catalyst that is pushing him along. And in this episode, instead of having dialogue back and forth, they're physically showing him having panic attacks and having issues with the idea of keeping Ellie safe. But I also agree, the story itself has been all about the trials and tribulations of Joel and Ellie getting to this point. And this point is, I'm not going to say rushed, I'm never going to say rushed because I love this show and I love what they did in this episode. But it is very anticlimactic, like you were saying.
Yeah.
It's just the way the story is, because there's so much that happens throughout the entire story that this is portrayed as a major thing, and it is. But in the grand scheme of things, this is step 6 in a 10-step process of getting to the end of the story.
Right. And I understand that. I can see from gameplay why this is obviously not the end, because
Right.
the end is to get Ellie to the Fireflies to figure out, the antidote or whatever. But um it just, from a storytelling, from a show type storytelling, it seems like this should have been a bigger thing.
I, I, I'm not going to say this episode's a miss. I just can't bring myself to that.
No, it was good.
It's a really good episode.
It wasn't that it was bad, but I was just like, the next day they get there, and the next day he's like, bye.
Yeah, and so in the game, they get to the hydroelectric dam. They figure out how to get the dam working. In gameplay, Joel helps get everything going. And Joel spends the entire time talking to Tommy about, like, I have something to talk to you about and whatever. And Marina is there, kind of like, what's going on? What's going on? They get to
Is that the woman
the
he's
wife,
having
the wife.
Are they married or whatever?
Right.
Baby mama.
Baby mama. uh, they get to Jackson, and Tommy and Joel finally have the conversation of, I cannot take her any further. I am physically, emotionally, spiritually, economically, and
Grammatically.
incapable of taking her the final way. The only reason I've brought her this far is because I need you to do this. And Ellie hears that, and instead of Ellie just going back to the house, she gets on a horse and takes off.
Okay.
And leaves the sanctity of Jackson, and they have to go chase her down. And so through that chase, Joel comes to the realization that, no, not that she's my ward, but I care about her.
He cares about what happens
to her so much.
Yeah.
And so them taking that chase, them chasing her down, them finding a rogue set of, I think it's infected in the mountain pass right outside Jackson. I think that's what it is. He comes to the realization that I need to save her.
Okay. Yeah.
In this, it is Joel's conversation with Ellie, and her telling him
Right.
that everyone around me has died or left me, and you're the only one who I feel safe with, and you're
Yep.
the only one who has stayed.
Yep.
And it's overnight that realization comes to him.
Yeah.
And I think, if I'm not gonna say that Neil Druckmann and Craig Madsen, who are running the show, I'm not gonna question anything they're doing in this show, because it's been 100% perfect show.
Yeah.
Up to this point.
Yeah.
This is the episode where I think, because they wanted to stay at 10 episodes and not 12 episodes,
they had
shows.
to cut too much.
They had to cut a little bit of it out, because that whole conversation of Tommy and Joel through Jackson, through the hydroelectric dam, through them trying to find Ellie, is Joel coming to the realization that he does actually care for her.
Yeah, it just feels like they should have spent more time, maybe, and not even necessarily time in the show that we had actually watched, but to represent a passage of time that they had both spent there with the community. Like I said, it was like a day.
Right.
Like, hey, I'm gonna cut your hair, and we're gonna watch a movie, and we're gonna eat a real meal, and then the next morning we're waking up and leaving.
Yeah,
and it's like, maybe they should have shown more of a passage of time of them staying there and Tommy and Joel actually getting to spend. They haven't seen each other in however. I mean, it's been
several years.
yeah,
Several years.
yeah. This whole thing has been 20 years, and it's been a while since they've seen each other, and Joel's just like, bye.
Yeah.
I came 2/3 of the way across the country, and
Cross
now I'm
country
leaving.
through eel infested waters
Yeah.
to get here, and that was always one of my complaints about the game itself, because this is not the crescendo of the story,
Right.
and that's all. But it has been it has always been the way they told the story. It's all about getting to this point. And you
Right.
get to this point, and you're like, okay, cool, we're here, and it's not. It's a false finish line.
Right.
And I think that's where I'm like, because we just watched the episode, so we're working our way through our feelings and our emotions as we go right now, and I think that's where we sit. I think that's where it's on purpose to have this false crescendo.
Yeah.
That everything has been about getting to Jackson and
Yeah.
Tommy.
Yeah.
And now that we're there, we as an audience, Joel as a person, have all come to a realization that it's not that.
Yeah.
It is about the
Yep.
journey of Joel and Ellie, and that Joel finds a surrogate daughter in Ellie.
Yep.
And even Ellie pointing out, I'm not her.
Yeah.
But her also understanding that she has feelings for Joel.
Yep.
As her protector, her father figure, her big brother, her best friend, however you want to.
I get all of it.
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
all of it.
I
It
just
just
think-
feels way too rushed.
I think 2 episodes or 20 minutes of dialogue fixes that whole conversation.
Yep.
And again, we're not sitting here saying this episode is bad. This episode is amazing again.
Yeah, it's just that little part right there
Yeah.
that I was like, wait, what? But tip folks, somebody stabbed, don't remove the item that has stabbed the person ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah. It's a
That
little
is keeping everything from coming out.
it's a little different. In the game, he gets overrun by one of the raiders at the college, and he falls and lands on a exposed pipe.
Still,
So
don't take that out.
but
Don't
but
take that out.
that's the difference is he, like, that whole section also is cut short. Them getting to the college, them finding
Yeah, it felt a
where the
little
fu-
rushed. Yeah.
like that whole process, and I'm actually really okay with that, because again, it's another false finish line,
Yeah.
like Jackson is.
Yeah.
So you just get through getting to Jackson, getting to Tommy, getting all that stuff. They all kind of come to their emotional understanding, and now it's all about getting her to the Fireflies,
Yeah.
and they have to get her to what is Colorado State, and that's in I just looked it up and I can't remember, but it's not that far from Jackson to Colorado State in
Colorado Springs?
It's further up. It's between Cheyenne and Denver.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's also another false finish line. They get there, they realize the Fireflies have left.
Yep.
They find the monkeys, they find the giraffe, the raiders are there. There's a big
Wait, there was a giraffe?
Yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to talk about, is
Okay.
that in them working their way through and trying to figure out where the Fireflies and where the actual stuff was going on, they come around the corner and there's a giraffe eating some of the vines that have built their way up the building.
Okay.
And Ellie and Joel have a very deep conversation about them both coming and saying, I care for you, but it's not directly that way.
Mm-hmm.
But the giraffe is there the entire time. Now they show the giraffe, or they talked about the giraffe in episode 1, episode 2. I think it's episode 2. And so the idea of the giraffe is in the series. But,
Yeah.
But it's that moment of them. But the biggest thing that happens through all of that process is they learned that the Fireflies, something happened. They had to leave.
Yeah.
They left.
Yeah.
They left to Salt Lake. They showed the map with Salt Lake. In the game, it's a voice recorder of one of the doctors who gets infected, and he gives his last kind of testament on the recorder. All the Fireflies move to Salt Lake, and
Yeah, and I think that's maybe why that specific part felt a little rushed because it was like we just come to the conclusion based on this map that they have all left, but we don't know why.
Right.
Like, why
Right.
did everybody leave from here? And that's, I mean, if you're going to explain it later, okay, but like, yeah, they didn't really spend a whole lot of time. Like, they just kind of walked around. There's some monkeys. There's a map. Looks like they've gone to Salt Lake, but nobody says why.
They
Like,
did pick up the piece of paper and it said, which is from the game. It was them
was a
finding
list
notes of lists of things to pack.
to pack.
Right.
But
there's
why
no
did
reason.
they leave
And-
here? Like, were they
Yeah.
overrun by infected?
Yeah,
Did
and-
they run out of supplies? What is the reason why they left here to go there?
And in the game, if you don't play that recording, you don't know why they left. You just know that they left.
Okay.
And so that's a thing for me that I'm like, okay, that's cool. It's cool because if you were one of those people who caught every note and caught it, that ish,
Did all the side quests.
did all the side quests. You like in the last episode with the little sanctuary they had in the tunnels in Kansas City, which
Yeah.
that's actually Pittsburgh, and they had the note of Ish and
Yeah.
Derek.
The drawing.
Like that was something that you knew as a game player if you found all the notes and read all the notes and everything. And so this is another one of those where us as the game players who caught the recording and picked it up and they're like, okay, the doctor's like, okay, I got infected. They've taken everything. They've moved it to Salt Lake. There's better facilities there. They have a better opportunity to do everything there. So that conversation is had. But in here, it's much more of just the way they present everything. It very much comes across as a rush job that everybody left.
Yeah, and I think I remember Ellie said, "Why did they go?" And Joel was like, "I don't know, maybe better facilities."
Yeah.
But then that was it. They just kind of dropped it. So, yeah, it just
I think at that point in time, the Raiders are all there. I think it's again this section of the game could have been 3 episodes,
Mhm.
but if you're going to cut anything from the story, this is that section where you need to do some cutting.
Yeah.
And I'm not. I personally want this series to be like 15 episodes, so you can spend all this time
Right.
eating all the scenery and all the feelings and everything. But ultimately, this episode comes down to Joel coming to the realization that he actually does care for Ellie, and the reason he keeps having panic attacks is because of that emotional level. And it's also Ellie coming to the realization that she has lost everyone around her, and the only person that has stayed around is Joel.
Right.
That is the whole arc of this episode, which is delivered perfectly. Like them finding the older Indian couple at the beginning and having soup and the whole conversation. That's not from the game. That's brand new for the show. But they need to have that conversation to say, "Hey, we're going in the right direction, show wise."
And to show kind of people again, kind of like the Frank and Bill, people just living, right? They're not raiding, they're not infected, they're not fireflies, they're not the QZ, right? Just people living outside of all of that and surviving and having, you know, fulfilling lives, together as families or as little groups of people, and just existing and still having a good life without being a bad person.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that they keep spending time with that concept, because a lot of times when we get into post-apocalyptic storytelling, every new person you come across is always the bad guy.
Yeah, they're either horrible or they're just doing horrible things to try to survive.
To survive. And I understand that story trope, but that's not how the real world is. And I really appreciate that in this episode they spent time. Everybody is on alert and everybody's on edge. Everybody's got their guns out and everything like that. But there's a moment of, no, you're actually okay.
Yeah.
And you're okay. I'm okay. We're all okay here.
But I would like to go to Cheyenne right now. That looked amazing.
Jackson.
Or Jackson, right? The
Yeah.
Christmas lights and the
Yeah, and I part of the reason why I was doing a whole like put my hands over my mouth is because this is not a spoiler. I mean, we're talking spoilers about the I'm throwing my cord around. It's not spoilers for the show, but it is spoilers for the second game. But the second game starts in Jackson, and so as they in that, and the only reason I'm bringing it up is because we watched the presentation they did. Was that E3 or San Diego Comic Con?
I think it was E3.
E3, where they took the audience and they went from
They
walked one site to the other to the
Yeah.
other, and so they showed the barn
Mhm.
at that presentation for Last of Us 2 in this episode where they're actually showing the movie.
Mhm.
And they showed the sheep and they showed the school and they showed the bar and so like a lot of that stuff in Jackson, I'm like, oh my god, they just set up season 2. There's also something else that happens in this episode that is completely and 1000% a setup for the second season. I will not talk about it until we get there, but it is a 1,000,000% that person is that person. You cannot tell me differently until you tell me differently on the internet. Just saying.
Or you see it differently on on
On
season
the,
2.
on season 2, which will be whatever. A couple other things I want to just talk about really quick. The argument, the conversation between Tommy and Joel. Joel telling Tommy like she's immune, and him saying like we did terrible things. That's straight from the game. As much as we're talking about them condensing this kind of part of the game down to like an hour and 5 minutes or whatever, 10 minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
But like they hit all the important major parts of this section, and them having that conversation. This is I'm pausing only because I'm trying to think of something else. This is the best acting performance from Pedro Pascal.
Oh yeah.
This episode,
Yeah.
we got an amazing thing from Bella Ramsey in the last 2 episodes, and at the end of this episode again too. But his conversation, Joel's conversation with Tommy, Gabriel Luna and Pedro Pascal's timing, the way they worked it, just the emotion that is from Pedro projecting onto Gabriel and Gabriel just receiving it. It like that whole scene, just like I know we're early in the Emmy season, but just like start putting those Emmy votes in now. That is the best I've ever seen Pedro Pascal.
Well, okay, to be fair, the other show that he's in, you don't see his face most of the time.
I don't think of Game of Thrones. He was great in Game of Thrones.
Okay, he was in Game of Thrones for a hot second. I'm thinking Narcos, because he was in at least 2 seasons of Narcos, and he is very good. I mean, if you haven't watched Narcos and all you know of Pedro is Mandalorian, where he's in a helmet the whole time, and Game of Thrones that he's in for a hot second and then dies.
Spoilers for a 10-year-old show.
Spoilers. Horribly. Eyes
bad.
bad.
It's bad.
It's bad. I mean, he's really good in Narcos, but that was kind of, again, that was a Netflix at a time when people, the Academy or whatever really wasn't paying attention to those performances, but he's really good.
He's amazing in this episode. To have that deep, fatherly, emotional hurt coming out, but also his self-realization that he is not the man he used to be.
Right. He's too old to
56, I think is what they're said in the show.
Shut the front door.
In the show.
I know.
I think Pedro is like in his late 40s, early 50s, whatever.
I'm not too old to travel cross country. But
no, but as a person of that starting to have that conversation with myself, I'm 47. But I am at a point in my life where I'm having that conversation that I am not the person I was 5 years ago, 10
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to see Joel come to this realization that he is not the person he once was, and that he cares for this person so much that he cannot carry the torch any further,
Yeah.
that scene is emotionally heartbreaking. Now, it's not as emotionally heartbreaking as losing Tess or Bill and Frank or some of the other things that we got, but it is for people like myself who can see that and go, I I have felt that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's really really hard for a lot of people to understand, and that's why I think this performance from Pedro is amazing.
Yeah.
Because it does convey that, and it's also I refreshing is not the right word, but it's also feels
It is refreshing. That's not a. It's not something that is shown in TV shows or movies or
yeah.
and movies are coming around a little bit more, but just the hey, I'm uh, the aging process, I guess.
The aging process, but it's also the strong, independent male who's been told his entire life, you don't show emotion, you just suck it up. You don't cry. You don't show emotion. You don't get upset. You you don't do any of that stuff. You hold it inside. And and my generation is one of the first generations that have allowed ourselves to be like, no, I'm having emotions. I am going to cry. I'm having this moment of realization, and to physically show that on the screen. God, this is gonna sound so bad. I see myself on the screen,
Yeah.
and the reason I hesitate saying that is I am a middle class, middle aged white male, so of course I see myself on the screen
Right.
all the time,
Right.
but I don't see myself this way,
Yeah.
and that's why I've been a really big proponent of representation matters across the board, whatever that representation is, male, female, a person of color, gay, straight, trans, whatever. All of that representation is important because from where I sit, I'm emotionally connected to Joel because I feel where he is.
Mhm.
I no longer have the physical ability to do what I used to do, except my physical ability is my hobby on the weekends and having fun, and his physical ability to do anything is protect the person he loves
Or survive in
or
this
survive in this
world. Yeah.
world or whatever.
Yeah.
And that is heartbreaking. And I think a lot of people are going to sit here and have the same conversation that we just had. It was rushed. It wasn't as good as the other episodes and whatever, which is all true. But you're missing the point, at least from my point of view, of Joel and his process that he goes through, and Ellie's process that she goes through of finally admitting that everybody around her has died,
Yeah.
which is a setup for the next episode, which is the next episode is the DLC episode of what happens when Ellie gets bit. So it's going to be a flashback episode to what all that happens.
Oh, okay. That's why Joel wasn't in.
Joel's not in it, and
Yeah.
it's about Ellie's really first feelings for somebody,
Yeah.
and so that whole conversation in the
Yeah.
mall and all that.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. This was after you said that. This is aside from everything else. This is a um. This is why. This is why I'm the way I am. This is why you're the way you are, and the kind of breaking down of that. Right. Ellie's a smartass, which kind of hides her feelings about the fact that everybody's left her, everybody's died,
Yeah.
whatever, and then Joel's just a hard ass
Cut off.
for the same
Yeah.
reason, right? So boil it all down, and that's kind of what this episode was.
Yeah, yeah. And this is the first time I think even Joel has allowed himself to feel emotions for somebody, including Tess, since Sarah
Right.
died.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I think that realization is the hardest part for Joel.
Yeah.
And then he gets stabbed, and then the realization that Ellie can't do this without Joel is is
Which I was saying to wrap it up. I was saying that the entire time, like he won't show her how to how to hunt for herself. He won't show her how to do any of this. And I kept saying it the whole time. You have got to show her, because if something happens to you, she's screwed. And she said that to him multiple times. I am screwed if you die. And he was just like,
the overprotective father who's like, you don't know you shouldn't handle a gun.
Right.
Except this episode, he teaches her how to shoot with the rifle.
Right, finally.
Right.
But now, we're kind of at that point where he could die, and she's going to be screwed.
I'm interested with how they handle the DLC, and that they make that decision. And then the next episode is going to be something that I'm going to squirm in my seats for, because I find it very uncomfortable about what happens in the next episode. But it's also it's also going to show why Joel is as the superhero of this universe, and I'm going to leave it at that, because I just think that's a better way of putting it. But I want to talk about where we're going, but I don't want to, because she hasn't played the game, and so I'm going to be quiet. So let us know what you thought of our discussion and reaction of this episode in the comments down below. Please be nice as we're coming around here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Follow us on all the social media stuff: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Links in the description down below. And until next time, cult members, good afternoon, good evening, and good night now.